Hi there, it's Sarah of Get Weaving. Something I'm going to try and address today is a question I get asked quite a lot at the moment, is what loom would I recommend? There's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is this one. It's my 20-inch Ashford knitter's loom. I'm weaving a piece of fabric on at the moment. I set it up yesterday. It took me hour and a half, hour and 3/4 to be all set up and weaving. I'm making a kind of vest. It's been so cold this winter. It's wool and alpaca. The warp is a mixture of double knitting wool and a sort of boucle, very old, and the weft is hand spun alpaca. I'm going to make something like this little top here. It'll be a new pattern, and there will be a dress on the pattern as well. I'm trying to add extra sizes to my sewing patterns at the moment, so this will probably go up to about a 4XL. So I'm going to make a mock-up, and I've already sorted the pattern out. This is set fairly open. I like doing that because then it's really easy to weave. It's 16 inches wide. I want to end up with a piece of fabric that's about 14 inches. So as I said, I did this yesterday, set it up in here. I'm in my shed at the moment. It's still pretty wintry out there. So these are the yarns I'm using. This is a really, really old called Astrakhan by Sirdar. Heaven above knows where I picked that up from. This is double knitting wool, and this is a wonderful cone of a sort of boucle. Lovely label. So like a lot of people, I'm trying to use up some of the things from the stash at the moment. So it looks like it's wool, acrylic and nylon. But it's really nice because it's giving a bit of a texture in the warp. So what I did, as usual, is set the loom up. I put the double knitting in first and left a gap, and then threaded the boucle afterwards. Same yarn at both edges. Yarn wound from the centre and pulled from the centre. Yarn wound into a ball. Numbered sheets on the back. So this is a 7-sheet project, and then they get unwound as I go along. So, the longer answer. Well, my friend Elizabeth and I have been going on about Rigid Heddle Loom since the 1980s. This is from my scrapbook when I was teaching at an adult education centre. And these are the sorts of looms we had. So the one on the left is the good old 12-inch Weave Master. The one on the right is a little box loom. And it looks like it's got a homemade heddle thing on it there. We made all sorts of things. But the nice thing is the people that came to the class were full of ideas. So the first things we made were scarves and bags. And a lot of them were already very accomplished stitchers. So lovely bit of, no, is that inkle or card weaving? Can't remember now. Nicely finished off, but already starting to make clothing. And we had a fashion show at the Adult Education Centre each year, and my class were always very happy to wear the things that they'd made. People couldn't believe that you could make clothing on these little tiny looms. So that was the clip from the newspaper, and you can see it's got one of our lolly stick heddles on there. And there's Elizabeth and I, all at New Hall in Boreham in 1987. And I think there are 2 Weave Masters there, and we're wearing what we've woven. But when you said weaving in those days to people, they just thought ponchos or scarves. Couldn't get their heads around making clothing at all. So that's fairly typical of the sort of loom that we had. They came out of lofts, they came from auctions, they came from charity shops. Grandma had had one. That's just how it worked. We also had a Spears loom. I mean, really, talk about basic. I think it was a frame, maybe Dryad, I'm not sure. And then a heddle from somewhere. You can see somebody's put it on a stick. So that was kind of what we were doing. Well, until people like Ashford started to make their wonderful Rigid Heddle Loom. So 1986, we produced our book Simply Woven, all full of clothing made on very simple looms. Excuse me. Worn by my niece because she looked wonderful in everything. And then we took that to different shows and had racks of clothing and looms ready for people to have a go at if they wanted to. So in, crumbs, about 2007, I believe, Elizabeth bought her first knitter's loom. It was a 12-inch one, folded up, went in a cardboard box. I still had loads of Dryad looms, so I didn't feel ready to buy another one. But I bought my first one in 2009 and started to make clothes on it. So I'm comfortably sitting weaving on my 20-inch at the moment. The 12-inch I can get about 9.5, 10 inches width fabric from. The 20-inch I can get, crumbs, about an 18-inch piece of fabric. Why do I love it? Well, it's so easy to set up. It's quick. It's comfortable. It folds, so I can put it in a bag and take it to shows. I've got all the heddles to go with it, because otherwise, as I've said before, it's like only having one pair of knitting needles. So when you buy your loom, always get all the heddles that go with it. So as I said, I set this up yesterday. Took me about an hour and a half. I did all the wraps first. I haven't made a sample because I realised this, I think I know this was going to work out just fine. I think I put 150 inches on. I always add a little bit extra so that if I don't like the way it's looking, I can leave that bit or use it as a sample. So I've wound it forward a little bit. As the pieces of paper from the back come off, I keep those for the next project. This is the alpaca yarn. It's 2 colours. This was off the guild sales table. Somebody brought in just this bag that said bits of alpaca. I thought, well, I can spin that. When this is first set up, because it has paper on the back, as I'm weaving, as I'm lifting and lowering the heddle, it tightens up on the back roller, which means that the warp gets a bit looser. So every so often, regularly, I just tighten it up, either from the front or the back, whichever works. This is just a stick shuttle that I'm using. It's slightly wider than the width of the fabric, which is wonderful because it just unwinds as I'm weaving. It's funny, Elizabeth and I started to go to shows. Well, that's good. I've just undone that row. Go back again. In 2007, I think. It was after our unweaving, not good. After our second book was published, which was called Creative Weaving. Same thing again. We went to Woolfest in Cumbria. We went to Wonderwool in Wales with looms set up for people to try. It was very funny though. there was a lady there, very nice, with a 4-shaft loom right by the entrance to the cafe. And we were on our way to get a coffee probably. And somebody said, how long does it take to set up? And she went, 3 to 4 days. And I thought, that's not exactly going to encourage anybody, is it? So we would have a loom on a table ready, and often Elizabeth would demonstrate setting up a rigid heddle loom. And people were genuinely astonished. How can you make a garment from a piece of fabric that's only 18 inches wide? And we said, well, as long as you don't mind having a seam in the centre front or an opening, then you have 2 fronts, 2 backs, sleeves. Often we cut the sleeves sideways. So there's absolutely minimal wastage. We've been doing it ever since. As I've said before, I wind my shuttles in a figure of 8. So around one side, quite a bit, but I'll speed this up a bit, and then flip it round and wind round the other side. That way your shuttle stays nice and flat, rather than having a great big fat shuttle. So you can see it's wound on both sides of the shuttle, much more effective. I still use my 12-inch Ashford Knitters loom. Every so often I'll weave a piece of fabric and just think, right, what can I do with this? So one of the earlier videos, it's in one of those anyway. Also, what happens when things go wrong and your fabric isn't wide enough or isn't long enough. There's all sorts of solutions that you can come up with. Just have to think outside the box a little bit. And I love it because it's easy and it's quick to set up if the grandchildren come round, because they've done bits of weaving as well. I haven't given away my 12-inch weave master yet, but one day I will have to. So what I'd suggest, if possible, because I have used Kromsky, I haven't used Schatz, but my friend Elizabeth has a flip loom which she loves. But my suggestion would be, if you can possibly try any of them, do so, because some of them really aren't very comfortable to weave at. Our guild, people have brought all sorts of different looms, sometimes because they were second-hand or because there was a special offer. My one bit of advice for a don't, though, is don't be tempted to buy a wider loom just because it looks good value. I've worked with 24-inch looms and they're fine. Anything wider I find far too cumbersome. This one, as I said, folds up, but I can also put it on a stand or take it outside, prop it up on a table in the garden when the weather's nice. And obviously those very, very wide rigid heddle looms take up a lot more room. And also, if you're weaving with a stick shuttle, you have to have very long shuttles. I know there are some people who have found weaving on their rigid heddle loom with a boat shuttle quite successfully. I have quite a slim Ashford boat shuttle, which I like. I also have a Schatz boat shuttle, I believe. But I'm quite happy with a stick shuttle. It's so easy to wind. It doesn't need loads of extra equipment. And I can wind sort of 3 or 4 so they're all ready to go. I find often that people end up buying the loom that they learnt on because so much of this is about confidence. And once you've learned how to set one loom up and it works, then people tend to stick with it. So our guild have a couple of these, probably on my recommendation, that people can borrow. And I've taught people on these, and I often find that that's what they end up buying, because you want to be able to do this without too much worry. We want it to be quick. You want the setup to be very similar. This one I did, as I said yesterday, in here, and for the extra length I put on my warping board at the end of the table. Yeah, it's all to do with confidence. You don't want to have to sit with an instruction book every single time. So, I mean, obviously I've set this up often, so I can do it without a problem. But if you only do one piece of weaving every so often, because that's all you've got time for, it needs to be easy. I've also got a Kromsky 8-inch. It's a little tiny one. I bought it specifically actually to weave samples on. It was in the sale, and I like to have one loom sort of spare even when I'm in the middle of a project, because like most people I've got several several things going at once, and I'll think, oh, I wonder how that would work. And so I've got a little 8-inch Kromsky to make samples on, which I do sometimes. The Ashford Heddles fit it as well, which is handy. One of the other reasons I like Ashford is because they're available at so many different venues, and also we've met the Ashford family, most of them. They came over here for the shows. They're all really nice. It's still a family business based in New Zealand. The spares are available. If you've got a problem, they do answer you, and I know there are some companies that don't. You send a message out and you never hear from them, which isn't particularly helpful. So back to my short answer, I would always recommend my 20-inch Ashford Knitters loom. I've had it for a long time now. It's still as good as new. I'm taking it to the guild tomorrow with this. I might take the stand, or I might just prop it up on the table. And you know, if you're worried that your fabric isn't going to be wide enough to make anything, just recently I've been stitching narrow widths together. And I'll make the seam as flat as I can. So what I often do is lay one over the other rather than doing right sides together and then opening it. So I'll lap one over the other and do probably a zigzag stitch down to hold them in place, and then just treat it like one piece of fabric. So if your fabric isn't quite wide enough, although I did do a video called What Happens When Things Go Wrong, because it does, we've all done it. Or your fabric shrunk more than you thought, or you didn't put enough on, or you changed your mind. The thing you thought you were going to make, you decided you don't like. There's also a video called Back to Basics, which has a lot more about sets and setting your loom up, all that sort of thing. So as you can see, I'm very comfortable sitting here. I'm just going to keep going for the moment, wind it forward. I don't want to finish it before tomorrow though. So I'll fold this up. I've got a bag for it to go in. Again, a really ancient bag. Terrible, this. So that's my bag. It's a bit of random warp again. And t-shirt. Cut up t-shirts for the weft. And, oh, I think these were tablet weaving. This is so old. Dearie me. Anyhow. Today I'm wearing DR012. It's a pinafore dress, it's cotton, and I've got JA013 over the top, which has a cotton warp, I think. Oh, and a hand spun wool weft. Terrible. Have a lovely day, and I've put links at the end so you can find things. Happy weaving. Bye now.